We all know the story of Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus as it's often subtitled. Man creates monster, man abandons monster, monster gets angry and hunts man down. It's considered the first sci-fi novel ever written, and there have been hundreds of adaptations, right? So what makes Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein so special? That was a trick question because it's Guillermo del Toro, okay? He is the master of monsters and dark fantasy, which means he knows how to make a creature feature that is as horrifying and disturbing as it is beautiful and poetic, right? And that's exactly what we get with Del Toro's Frankenstein, which he spent 30 years developing. In Del Toro's Frankenstein, we've got the ooey gooey Oscar Isaac playing the mad scientist Victor Frankenstein. We also have Mia Goth delivering dual performances as Victor's mom, Claire Frankenstein, as well as his love interest, Elizabeth, which means that these two characters are identical, okay? And as disturbing as the insinuation may be as to why Victor's interested in his mom's twin, I actually loved that detail of the film for two reasons. Reason number one is because it's not canon to the story, which means this idea came directly from Del Toro's twisted little mind. And two, which is more of a biased reason, is because doppelgangers are a special interest of mine.
Loser! You're a loser!
They are my favorite gothic trope because they add an extra layer of uncanniness to a situation that's already strange enough as is. So thank you very much, Del Toro, for giving us Mia Goth as a doppelganger. Though I'm also sort of grieving the third role Mia Goth was supposed to play, which would have been Frankenstein's bride, and I just know it would have been
epic.
And then, of course, we have Jacob Elordi as the creature, and man, I can't believe this is the same guy who played Nate Jacobs in Euphoria and Noah in The Kissing Booth. But what I was most impressed by was how well he played the creature in different phases of its life. We see him basically as a newborn man with the wonder and whimsy of a child. Then we see him develop the intelligence of a philosopher and the emotional depth of a poet. And we also see him in assassin mode. And even though his face is obscured a lot of the time, he does this acting with his eyes that I didn't know he could do, which just blew my socks off. Now, with Del Toro's Frankenstein, the plot is very similar to the novel, but there are differences in tone, aesthetics, and character traits that the adaptation police might not like. The film opens with Victor looking jacked up, trying to get some help from a crew whose ship is stuck in the ice, and all you hear is a series of deep, monstrous roars echoing throughout the Arctic, and it's really scary, especially from the perspective of the ship crew who are stuck in the middle of nowhere with what seems like the thing from The Thing coming after them. And when the captain and his crew see how tall and obscure the creature looks, they attack him with guns, they try to fight him off, and the creature is just there cracking spines and using bodies to beat other people up Mortal Kombat style. And what's really cool about the opening scene is that it's actually the end of the story. So after the opening scene, the first half of the film is Victor's account of his life and why he created the creature. And the second half of the film is from the creature's perspective. And man, was the second half of Frankenstein depressing as fuck. Because it's like, yeah, you thought Victor had it rough, but guess who has it rougher? The undead guy who's made from the scrapped body parts of deceased soldiers, who also accumulates all these very painful memories of death, who also gets framed, abandoned, and villainized by his creator. Del Toro's Frankenstein also has a more linear narrative and a more hopeful ending where we still see Victor die, but him and the creature sort of reconcile their differences, and the creature chooses to live instead of trying to end his life.
Oh my God, my Shayla.
And one of my favorite aspects about Del Toro's Frankenstein is that the creature is immortal, which is unique to his adaptation of the story. And for me, that makes the creature's existence all the more tragic, but also more meaningful because he can't die, right? So then not only is he tormented by existence like most of us are, but what's worse is that he will potentially experience this torment all alone for all of time with nothing but hope to keep him going, which is bleak, but also beautiful. Is it not? And one thing that Del Toro did a great job at keeping intact is the portrayal of the creature's intelligence, because in most film adaptations of Frankenstein, we see the creature portrayed as unintelligent and unable to express himself through anything but grunts. But what Del Toro does is restore the creature's intelligence and profound sense of empathy, which more closely aligns with Mary Shelley's original creature. And I really love this aspect of the film, not only because it's faithful to the novel, but because it hits a lot harder knowing that the creature is intelligent enough to understand his suffering while also being unable to resolve it. Does it get more tragic than that? I don't know. I don't think so. If it wasn't clear, I loved Frankenstein. It was so beautiful, so moving, and also so off-putting to the point where I felt like I was having a religious experience. I also got to watch it at TIFF, and it was one of the most fun theater experiences I ever had because it was a theater packed with genre, horror, and Del Toro fans, and everyone at my screening at least was hyped up on pure adrenaline at 9 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. But if I didn't see Frankenstein in theaters at least once, I would have blinded myself, because what would the point of having eyes be if not to watch Frankenstein on the big screen? Riddle me that. And I know my opinion doesn't matter much, but I'll go ahead and say it anyways. Frankenstein is not only my favorite, but I would argue it's one of the best films of 2025. Solid story, strong performances, great costume designs that tell their own story about the characters and the time period, beautiful shots and set design, and also a very clever use of space, which is another aspect about Frankenstein that I'm a huge fan of. The wide shots we see in the Arctic and Victor's mansion lab are both great examples because there's just a substantial amount of spatial emptiness there.
Spatial emptiness there. Spatial emptiness there.
I'm a college man. I won't need my high school diploma anymore. I am too smart. I am too smart.
The Arctic is desolate and the mansion is basically abandoned even when it's inhabited, and Del Toro uses these spaces to not only reflect isolation on a physical level, but also on every other level imaginable. Because while Victor and the creature are often in these spaces together, they rarely ever have the same motives, and they're rarely ever on the same moral or emotional page, which then creates an imbalanced dynamic that leaves them both in a state of like spiritual or cosmic isolation, if that makes sense. I've also heard some complaints and read some reviews where people seem to have issues with the pacing and the lighting, and they're saying the cinematography is very Netflix looking, which I think refers to the poor color grading and low contrast, but I didn't notice those things very much with Frankenstein. I will say that its runtime is longer than the average film, and it is an adaptation that expands the existing story, which people don't always like. If the cinematography and lighting is actually bad, Everything else was so good that I couldn't even perceive any of the flaws. I'd also like to note that I'm not biased because I know that Del Toro's got some stinkers, okay? He's got some questionable weapons in the artillery like Mimic and Blade 2, and even though I still with those films, I wouldn't ever recommend them to people because I know they're deeply flawed. But Frankenstein is different. Frankenstein is life-changing, okay?
May Zeus himself strike me down if I'm lying.
Call me bipolar the way I went through such a range of emotions. I was sad, I was happy, I was afraid, I was in awe. And what's crazy is that I was already so well versed with the story of Frankenstein, and I still ended up surprised on multiple occasions, especially that opening scene.
Oh my god.
Unfortunately, there are very limited theater screenings of Frankenstein, and with the economy and all, I don't know how many people can actually go to the movies, but Frankenstein's also coming out on Netflix on November 7th, so this would be the perfect time to get a trial membership or something so you can experience the beauty of Frankenstein firsthand. It's literally what I imagine it would feel like to be baptized or to see a biblically accurate angel. That's just my opinion. Frankenstein is now up there with Pan's Labyrinth, Shape of Water, Hellboy, and I'd be interested to know what other people's favorite Del Toro films are and whether you watched Frankenstein and liked it. But if you didn't like it, keep that to yourself because nobody wants to listen to a liar, okay?